Hey Sojourning Scholars, it's Chucky here from SojourningScholar.com, the #1 platform that empowers international students and working professionals in the US. And in this video, I'm going to be addressing a hotly debated topic amongst international students, and that is the question of, given the choice of studying in the United States or Canada, which is the best place to study as an international student? And in addressing this question, I'm going to present an objective opinion as to which country could be better for you, but I'm also going to be leaving you with a subjective opinion explaining why I chose to study in the US as opposed to in Canada. So make sure to watch this video through to the end, as the information presented here would help you make a choice between pursuing your international studies in Canada or in the US. Coming right up. So to give an objective answer to this question, we're going to have to look at 5 main metrics that most international students really consider when it comes to pursuing their studies abroad. The first metric to look at is the question of which of these countries offers the best quality of education. Now, when it comes to determining which of these countries has the higher quality of education, it's not fair to look at the rankings of top universities in the world. If you were to look at the rankings of the top 10 universities in the world, you would find that most of those schools are American schools, and you'll be hard-pressed to find any Canadian universities on that list. But it's not fair to conclude, based on the rankings of the top universities in the world, that schools in the US are much better than the schools in Canada. As a matter of fact, one thing you have to keep in mind when looking at the rankings of universities is that the metrics for ranking schools is largely weighted on the quality of research from each university as opposed to the quality of teaching in each university. So when it comes to the quality of teaching between the United States and Canada, it's safe to say that both countries are about the same. However, when it comes to the quality of research, on average, the universities in the United States are slightly better than the universities in Canada. So what this means for you is that if you were trying to pursue a non-research based program, such as a bachelor's degree, then it makes no difference if you choose to go to Canada or the US. You would get the exact same quality of education based on teaching. However, if you want to pursue a research-based program such as a master's degree or a PhD degree, then you might want to lean towards selecting the United States simply because of the better quality of research in US universities. The second metric you would have to consider when making a choice between these two countries is the cost of education as an international student. And it doesn't matter if you compare public and private universities in Canada versus public and private universities in the US, you would always find that on average, the cost of education in Canadian universities is much lower than those in US universities. So objectively, when it comes to the cost of education for international students, Canada is the clear winner here. The third factor you would have to consider when making a choice between these two countries is the quality of life you can experience as a foreigner. And with this metric, you would have to consider things like the average cost of living between these two countries, but also consider non-tangible things such as the climate differences and the excitement of different cities between these two countries. Now, when it comes to the cost of living, there's not quite a straightforward answer as to which of these countries has the lowest cost of living, simply because your cost of living is location dependent. So someone who lives in a populated city like Toronto in Canada would have a much higher cost of living compared to someone who lives in a less populated city somewhere in the Midwest United States. However, when it comes to the quality of life, a major deciding factor between these two countries is the climate options presented in both countries. And on that metric, the United States is much better simply because of the varied climate options that are present in the US compared to those in Canada. To keep it plain and simple, the weather options in the US are much better than those in Canada. The fourth factor to consider is the employment opportunity for international students in both countries. And on this factor, the US wins by a landslide simply because of its large economy relative to that of Canada. In other words, the larger economic activity in the US creates more job opportunities for everyone, international students included. And finally, the fifth important metric to consider are the immigration policies towards incoming immigrants such as international students. Objectively, when you look at the history of the immigration policies towards international students in Canada and in the US, you would find that Canada is the clear winner. To be more specific, Canada has a direct pathway that allows international students to become permanent residents of Canada after the completion of their studies. However, with the US, this is not the case. At the completion of your studies in Canada, you can pursue what Canada calls a postgraduate work permit program. This program allows most international students in Canada to work for a period of 3 years after the completion of their studies. And during this 3-year period, they could easily transition into a permanent resident status. And in the case of the US, although the US has postgraduate training programs such as the optional practical training for F1 visa students and the academic training for J1 students, these programs do not offer any pathways for international students to become permanent residents in the US. So given this objective assessment of Canada versus the US, here is my subjective opinion as to why I chose to go to school in the US as opposed to in Canada. So given those 5 metrics, the most important metrics for me was the quality of education, but in particular, the quality of the research programs in Canada versus those in the US. Now, because I wanted to pursue a research-based program, the fact that there were a lot more highly ranked research-based programs in the US compared to those in Canada was an easy sell for me to choose to go to school in the US. Now, when it comes to the cost of my education, I knew this was going to be much higher in the US than in Canada, but I still chose to go with the US because of the larger offerings of scholarships and fellowships from US university programs compared to those of Canadian programs, especially if you're pursuing a research-based program. And the second important factor that I considered was the better climate options in the US versus those in Canada. And there you have it. That was my take on this topic of Canada versus the US for international students. Let us know what your take is down in the comment section below. Like and share this video if you found this valuable, and as always, be unbounded.